Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast, where I just signed in to the Coast to Coast database. And for those of you that haven't heard it, I downloaded my January 5th, 2019 Coast to Coast appearance with Jimmy Church, who interviewed me about Two-Face the Gray. And the reason I wanted to put this up here for you guys to listen to is because I just listened to all of it again, and it's incredible to me how kind of accurately and how well Two-Face the Gray has aged, because Skyfall was just dead on when you stop and consider this interview was in 2019. Skyfall got in contact with me in 2017, where we filmed a lot of Two-Face the Gray in 2017 and 2018. So when you consider everything that has come to fruition in the alien UFO world, that's pretty incredible. So I just wanted to put it out there for you to check it out. Having said that, my friends, enjoy, and I will be back very soon with more. All the best.
All right, he's here. He just arrived from the green room. Chad Calek is here. Now, we're going to be talking about his new movie. It's called Two-Face the Gray. It's part 2 for Sir No Face. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Chad Calek's in the house, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Coast AM. Live in the studio, Chad Calek is here. And Chad has spent over 25 years investigating the world's most haunted locations in search for answers to the bizarre, the mysterious, and the unexplained. Now, although known for capturing some of the most compelling evidence in the history of the paranormal field, Calek has also developed a reputation as a debunker who has discovered rational explanations to many of the world's most famous paranormal legends. He is the director and producer of American Ghost Hunter documentary, which chronicled his family's 20-year battle with the paranormal, and also Sir No Face. Now, Sir No Face came out last year, which, again, chronicled the Australian government's sanctioned paranormal investigation that led to the filming of a full-body apparition, and which, for the first time in history, definitely proves something. Is it ghost, or is it proving the existence of something else? I don't know. Tonight, live here in the Coast Studios, we're going to talk about his latest documentary, Two-Face the Gray, his sequel to Sir No Face. I would like to welcome back to Coast, Chad Calek. Chad, welcome, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it, definitely.
You weathered the storm to get here to the studio, and thank you for that. It's pretty bad out there right now in the streets of L.A.
It's an honor, man. It's an honor for sure.
Yeah, thank you. And now, okay, let's back up for a second before we talk about your history, and even if we have the time to get into that, because there's so much to talk about what's going on right now with this documentary. When I first saw Sir No Face, my reaction to it was, at that time, I don't think this is a ghost. It seemed solid to me, right? I knew that.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and that's something that we definitely talked about throughout the entire investigation. I mean, for the 2 years, that was a thing we kept coming back to. The reason why that didn't so much take anything out of play for us is specifically in the field of shadow people. If you've studied that specific genre of spirit, ghost, there is definitely appears to be the ability to stop light, and which the only way you can stop light is with mass. There's a gentleman named Keith Age. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not. He did some work with the Booth brothers, which, you know, however you feel about their work. Keith did a lot of work in Waverly Hills, specifically with laser lights, where he was shooting down the 4th floor corridors, and these things would pass and break this laser light. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of conversation going on as to, is a full manifestation, does it include some level or some degree of mass to it? And if so, does that mean that we're talking about coming from one dimension into the other partially? So we kind of looked at it like, well, it could be just future science that we're not, you know what I mean, that we're not really up to par with yet. Maybe this proves that. Maybe this clip actually proves that. But what I realized, once we started going on tour with the film, what I realized, first off, let me rewind. When we went on tour with the film, I was expecting, just all kinds of people to come out with their fangs. Because whenever you say, I've captured this, it proves something, I know it does, you always have, obviously, the skeptical that want to try to find,
How many cities?
28.
28 cities.
Yeah.
So out of 28 cities, let's say, I'm just going to pull numbers out, 500 people at each theater, right?
Yep.
Just rough numbers.
Yep.
That's a lot of, you can get a taste of how people are feeling with that. How much negativity came out with that many people?
Now, we did an hour-long Q&A after the film every night.
Right.
There were only 2 people that challenged me as far as we think it's fake.
Well, and see, okay, now let me jump in. We all now practice discernment when it comes to videos.
Right.
Videos are getting just too good. Paranormal, UFOs, it doesn't matter what it is, right?
Right.
And so we look at it. We know when something feels a bit off.
Right.
Your clip with Sir No Face, it just feels real to me. I don't know what's in the video,
right?
But the video's not fake.
Well, that's what we started to realize. I would say what shocked me is that roughly, I would say half of our audience would come up to me and go, love the film. You captured something. But I'm telling you, man, it's not a ghost. It's an alien.
Now, okay, for the audience that hasn't seen it yet, we've got links up over at Coast to Coast AM. You can click on Chad's name and you can navigate your way through to the video. But I will describe it. This is what happens. Now, this is Chad. It's Chad's film. He's going to describe it to you another way. Right. I'm going to describe to you what I saw as I jumped out of my skin. It is, it looks like it's down a hallway with an open door. I could be wrong. I wasn't there, but this is what it appears. And then this guy, this dude, this thing leans over and takes a peek and comes back and is looking at you guys. What I see is a classic alien ET gray shape of a head with a white torso and frame and body that seems a little bit slender. Right. That's what I see. And he leans over and takes a peek. Is that all of the video there is? How long is that clip?
Of actual No Face, yeah. The clip itself total is probably 5 seconds.
5 seconds, yeah.
But what was interesting and what I realized, you ever heard like the old expression, if you make something a hammer, everything looks like a nail?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's the same thing with the paranormal. What we started realizing is there was paranormal stuff that was related to the extraterrestrial possibilities happening the whole time, but because the government said to Craig, it's a ghost. It's paranormal stuff.
Australian government.
Yes, the Australian government reached out and hired Craig Powell and WSPR to do this 2-year investigation. And that was their belief, is that this is paranormal as in ghost. Now, once I started seeing the level of activity on the films, I mean, that they had filmed, the reason I was so excited about doing this documentary, because I thought either I'm going to catch the biggest hoaxer in the world, and that's going to make for a hell of an entertaining documentary, or it's going to be the most fascinating documentary ever, because No Face was distributing, Sir No Face was able to do things and had characteristics that were unlike anything that I had ever experienced in 25 years, starting with the fact that it could light up a room like a lightning bolt on call. All they would have to do is ask this thing, sir, can we see your light? And it would just poof in the room. And they were bringing members from the government out. They were bringing skeptics off the streets, their friends. So I was like, man, I've just never seen a ghost do things like this at all, or even heard things like that. So,
well, I didn't want to pollute anything. Right. I see stuff and I go ET, like I'm on autopilot. And I didn't want to, pollute your thoughts or anything that you were seeing or anybody else. You're the one so I didn't say anything. You contacted me, and I was like, well, that's exactly what I've been saying.
A lot of people did, yeah.
So what was the first person or researcher that came to you and said, you know what, I don't think that's a ghost?
Well, the first person that said it to me was on the first night of our tour. And we had talked about it amongst the team, because there's a series of weird events that happens, which we'll get into, that we were literally trying to overlook. But the first night, there was someone that came up to me and of the tour and said, I'm telling you, you got it wrong. Like, you got to, start, will you reopen this? Like, will you go back and relook at it? And, that's the one great thing that I love about this film. And, as a documentarian, I'm not trying to say I have the answer. I'm trying to find the answer. And I think one of the problems in this field in general is there's a whole lot of people that are absolutely certain of stuff that they don't know anything about.
Right.
It's a very difficult field to find answers to.
That's right.
So it's kind of like a lifeline, when you're hearing the audience saying, I think it's this, it gets to the point where you just can't look away from it.
Now, what's the difference for you with the two communities, the ghosts and the paranormal and the ghost hunters? And now you are being thrust into the UFO community and having to go down that road, which is a whole nother, it's a vast amount of knowledge and things and researchers. Are the two communities the same? Are they arguing about the same points?
Well, admittedly, I think both communities have been really acceptive to me, but I think that's because I don't come across as trying to pretend that I'm the all-knowing Oz of the UFO world. I'm not a novice by any stretch. I've certainly, studied probably the same cases everybody else has, but there's, in no way am I, a Tyler Glockner. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, I'm not that embedded in that world where I know of it. So a lot of it for me has been a learning process too, which has been really exciting. Now, you always get your people that, that footage wasn't this, and that wasn't that. And I think when people start worried about, like, minutia on that level, you're missing a big picture. Like, there's a real big picture to the UFO community side. And that's what I'm thinking. That's what's really different. I think that the one major difference as well is there's a lot more fear embedded in the UFO side than there is the ghost side.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. And which takes me to my next question.
Yeah.
The Australian government funded this research, and they funded it apparently under the guise of a paranormal study out on this island, right? Now, is it that they wanted you? I'm not trying to force your answer here,
right?
But do you think that they wanted you to go out there with your team to capture an ET? Right.
Well, that's the weird thing. What never made sense to me is when they first got a hold of Craig, it was like immediately, and you learn this through this documentary. It wasn't included in Sir No Face, which, by the way, you can see Sir No Face at ondemand.com/Sir No Face. So they went out and they offered him the world immediately. We're going to pay you like kings. We want you to run events out here. We're going to pay you for that. And it never made any sense because any paranormal investigator would have cut off their arm to get on that island.
Right.
So why is the government right away just throwing money and they said, we'll buy you new equipment, whatever you want. Just give us a thing. So they were almost like doing whatever they could to ensure they showed up.
Right.
Then what's really weird is this went on for 2 years in which Craig and his team, they were showing them evidence, shocking evidence that's in the film that entire time. So, like, what would it take to be like, okay, you got evidence. Let's do like it in retrospect, looking back, it almost seemed like Craig thought he was documenting this thing, Sir No Face, while the government was documenting Craig's interaction with this thing.
You're right. And so,
it's
okay, here's the $1 million question. I'm just going to go straight there.
Right.
Do you think that the Australian government knew that there was an ET component to all of this and had nothing to do with paranormal?
I think they knew something was out there. I don't know if... I don't know. I mean, there's enough evidence in the film. Certainly, it's very compelling that they would know.
Why would the government care about ghosts?
Yeah, the thing is, I started learning this from the UFO community, and that's what they were pretty much saying, too. Like, if it was a paranormal ghost thing, like, they wouldn't care. Like, that's not something they can control, manufacture, manipulate. There's religious beliefs, but they can do that through the sky with, I've learned about blue beam and, like, things like this and this pending fake alien invasion.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's the one thing, is they wouldn't have, when you look into the history of Pine Gap, this thing started out as a joint space research center between the CIA and the Australian government. which, there are many people that believe that that's the most important base when it comes to back engineering, not only craft, but grays and beings. And the thinking and the idea is that when this, supposed pending alien invasion comes, that you're going to need more than just pictures in the sky. You're going to need something to convince somebody.
On the ground.
On the ground.
Right.
And the thing that just doesn't make any sense also is after the second they bring me out there, an outsider that they can't control, that's not in their circle, the day after we do a sold-out event, Craig shows this footage, they kick everybody off the island, it's done, it's over. And I thought for sure they would contact me and be like, listen, you can't make this documentary, you can't do that. Not at all. When they contacted Craig and myself, what they said was, you're going to do whatever you want. No one here is going to talk. The only thing that we want to ask is that you remove our names. And I remember saying to Craig, are we doing what they want us to do?
Right.
Are we pushing the agenda that they want us to push?
Yeah, so is the island still closed, or do they open it back up?
See, the story gets crazier and crazier.
Right.
Because, so after bouncing them off the island, it stays shut down until Sir No Face comes out and starts doing very, very well.
What's the name of the island?
Cockatoo Island.
Cockatoo. Right.
Yes. So after Sir No Face starts doing well, suddenly you hear this story that the government now hired a paranormal tour guide that nobody over there even knows in the community, and they're charging $5,000 a night to spend the night there on this paranormal tour, which they're not allowing people to go into Sir No Face, his quarters. So they're pushing the agenda, but they don't want Craig in there, which doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you not? If it's legitimate, this is the guy you brought in to find your evidence. He found it. He has it. If you're pushing all this, why are you doing this? Well, a lot of this started to happen when Craig started, publicly stating things aren't adding up and weird things are starting to go on.
Now, Craig lives in Australia.
Yes, he lives in West Sydney.
And hello, Craig. Craig is... I'm going to say this. If I'm walking down a dark alley, if I'm leaving a bar late at night, I want Craig walking next to me.
Yeah.
I don't think Craig is intimidated by much.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So that being said, and I'm a big guy, but he's a big guy. He is having some Men in Black experiences or something strange is going on out there, and he looks visibly shaken from this.
Well, here's the thing. Let me precursor everybody, kind of back up a little bit. When I first met Craig, I knew him a year before he ever even told me about this case with Sir No Face. So it's not like he was pushing it off on me or anything like that. It just came up through conversation at an event we were going to do. Then I spent 2 years of my life trying to catch this man in a lie. And I'm basing that off a previous year of common conversation that we would have. Any way that I can try to catch him lying, I went after it. And the idea being is, I think you said earlier, we can kind of tell what's fake with film and what isn't.
Right.
So what becomes more important now is the character of the man and the measure of his life and what he does and what his history is.
Well, let's pick up on all of this when we come back. Live in the studio with us, Chad Calek. And we're talking about his film Sir No Face, which now it may be Sir Gray. And the sequel is out now. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. More Chad after this. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Chad Calek is live with us here in the studio. But before we get back to Chad, have you seen Elon Musk tweets? Have you seen the meme of Armstrong? Chad, have you seen it? You have? Okay. No, you don't have to bring up this mic. I just want Chad to nod. Yeah, I love it. See, normally I'm alone in the studio in the dark, and now I've got somebody here to hang out with. And anyway, Elon Musk posted this trippy meme on his official Twitter account, which said, and I'm quoting here, "There are no coincidences." And it's a picture of Neil Armstrong next to an alien gray. And written over the two images were the words, "Neil Armstrong was the first person to land on the moon. Neil A. backwards is alien." Now, okay, just go check out the meme. I don't know what's up with Elon. But, I mean, I love the guy and everything. Or, this is the thing, the guy builds his own rockets. He's got his own space company. He's going to Mars. Does he know something that we don't? Hey, I'm just saying. Chad Calek is our guest. We're talking about Two-Face, The Gray, his sequel to Sir No Face. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Coast to Coast AM. Live in the studio with us is Chad Calek, and Chad has got part 2 that's out now. It's called Two-Face, The Gray. It's his sequel to his film, Sir No Face. Now, just to do a little recap here, Sir No Face showed what appears to be, for the first time caught on video, like a full-bodied apparition. It's an anomaly of some kind. And now Two-Face, part 2, and I don't want to get anybody confused here, same set of footage, it's the same video, but it appears now, taking a second look, that it may not be a ghost.
Yeah, just because I always forget it, so everybody knows, you can see Two-Face the Gray at the Vimeo website, vimeo.com/on-demand/Two-Face. Two-Face the Gray, it goes back and says, did we get this wrong? Just openly, how could this many people say, we think you filmed something, but we think it's a gray? Now, weird things started happening the entire time.
And that's where I want to start.
That's where we left off. Yeah.
Let's go there right now, okay. Chad. Because, what's different from the paranormal world, when you get into the UFO world, that's if strange stuff is going to happen, forces from the outside, whether it's government, people, contactees, abductees, ET itself, these things really start to show themselves in your life, and I'm sure that it wasn't anything close to that in the paranormal world.
No, not at all. In the paranormal world, the 25 years I did, nothing was weird.
Your phone was never tapped in the paranormal world?
No, really.
No Men in Black?
As you see in the film, over in Australia, I was promoting another film of mine, Blood Red Sky, and we had just decided to make Sir No Face. And that night, this guy with an Amun-Ra tattoo on his face, a patch on his eye, dressed like the most evil Crocodile Dundee character you could ever see, shows up, buys a VIP ticket because he just wants 2 minutes with me, hands me this package that he says that he was shot and knifed for, and shows me his wounds, and tells me that the package contains the biggest story in the world. He doesn't want money. He won't accept it. He doesn't want a TV show. He can't. He has to stay, hidden, that type of thing. And that if I look over the package and I think it's crazy, throw it away and I'll never hear from him again. And the intensity in this guy, just the way he walked, the way he carried himself, the way he spoke, he did not appear to be crazy. He appeared to be intensely frightened. And after giving me the package, he got out there as quickly as he could and told me that if I accepted it, that I would be placing myself in danger. And I tried to throw it away, man. I tried to put it away and pretend it isn't real, but it was just something I couldn't walk away from. And that started when Craig called me. Once I got back from touring over there, it was about a month after, I get a phone call from Craig. And like you said, Craig comes off like he ain't afraid of nothing.
No.
Not too many people on planet Earth are going to startle him.
Right.
And you can hear the phone calls because we were recording phone calls for Sir No Face at that time. Oh, sorry. We were recording phone calls for Sir No Face at that time. So this phone call comes out of the blue, and you could hear how terrified he is in the film, where he's talking about these 2 men knock on his door and, ask him how he's doing by his name. They don't know him. They tell him that, he needs to go ahead and just stop working on Sir No Face.
He said they were very clean cut.
Yes, very clean cut. He said they were young. The weird thing, he said they smiled the whole time. They never broke smile. So he said if you were across the street, even if they're threatening him, it would visually appear like they were having a kind conversation.
He said they felt like Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's what he thought. Yeah, they were. And they told him that they hoped they didn't have to come back again, that the film wasn't going to go through, that they knew who I was, and that he needs to just move on and quit. So Craig obviously responds, with anger. He goes back, in the time that it took him to take 2 steps to grab his telephone turn around and come outside the door. And this is all laid out very well in the film. There's this massively long driveway.
That goes uphill.
That goes uphill, a 9% grade, and they're gone in less than 10 seconds. And this is, it's the numbers, the math is actually in the film. And they, recreate, and you see there's just no way that this could happen. There's just no way it could happen. And again, this is a man that I've spent previously 2 years trying to debunk him and catch him lying. And I just know he's not lying. I just know him. I know his family now. I've dug into everything. He wouldn't want to be known as a guy that was scared of this. He wouldn't want this out there.
These two guys, they came back.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what I'm urging, Craig to get out there and talk about it. And hopefully he could either come on here or somewhere else, because I think this provides a degree of protection. But the story I'm going to tell you is what he told me. And this happened 2 weeks ago, like after we first talked, right after.
Right.
So Craig says he looks over at the door and his little cat, is having a seizure. So he walks over the door like, what is going on? His cat's never had seizures before. And when he gets to the door, it's a screen door separating him, and he sees the two guys there. And he says, as he gets closer, he says there's some kind of electrical field. And he says he walks right into it. This sounds crazy. I know this sounds crazy. It's everybody I know this sounds crazy. But he says he walks right into it, and it locks him up where he can't move. And they tell him straight up, you are going down a road you don't need to be going down. All this two-faced stuff, all this alien stuff, it ends now. They tell him, listen, how's your wife doing? How's your kids doing? They list off where, his kids go to school.
Same two guys.
They tell him multiple ways that they could ruin his life and destroy his life, planning stuff on his computer.
Now, this is a new house, right? He moved out of the old one.
Yes.
So they followed him to his new location.
Yes. Now, this scared him so bad that for those 2 weeks, he didn't talk to me. And I was getting phone calls from different numbers from his wife. And I just had to catch the number. And she was, I think, using a burner phone. And then she finally got a hold of me and said, this is what's going on. Craig is terrified to call you just because he doesn't know. Like, he's freaking out. And which I said to her, I said, well, listen, do we just want to walk away from, like, you know what I mean? Just in this, like, what are we doing here? And I said, you guys tell me, because you have kids, if someone's threatening your family, what are we doing here?
Now, I listened to one of your recorded conversations, and clearly you can hear beeps going on during the conversation. And every time you guys started to bring up the beeps, this is what I heard, the beeps would stop.
Yes.
And they would restart. Is that what was going on?
Over and over. We could literally talk for 30 minutes as long as we didn't mention no face, the alien aspect, anything. The second we would start talking about it, you would hear those beeps that you would hear up until Craig would go, do you hear that? Do you hear that? And I go, yes, I'd hear it. And then it would stop. And this was like clockwork, And this is in the film as well, too. There's also something I brought you to show you in regard to these Men in Black characters. So I get a call again from Nikki, and she says, Chad, there's someone now that's just watching our house all the time. And I said, what are you talking about? And she goes, last night I was hanging out with Craig. It's about 2:30 in the morning. We were super geeked out. And she's like, we look across the street and we can see what looks like a man, and he's wearing some kind of mask with a mild glow to it.
What?
Yeah.
And you have a picture of it?
So he actually sneaks out, I think they both did it, snuck out behind the house to go around, because he's in the front of the house looking back at it. So they go around to take a picture, and they sneak around, come around the block, take a picture from the back, and you can see it right here.
Okay, hand it to Mike, and Mike.
And he does indeed appear to be wearing something that's glowing. It's just weird. I don't even know, dude. This is the weirdest stuff I've ever heard.
What city was this taken in?
This is in West Sydney.
Oh, that's really?
Yeah. How creepy is that?
What?
Yeah.
Okay,
2:30 in the morning. They're staring back at their home.
So he's got a black jacket. He's dressed in black.
Yeah, and he has some kind of glowing mask.
That is a glowing mask.
Yeah.
I don't like this picture.
It's very creepy. It comes off as very menacing.
Wow.
So they are scared right now. So part of my reason in getting hold of you was to just say, listen, I've got to get this out, because I'm a true believer that awareness is protection, that you've got to get things out to people. And that's what I told them, obviously, that I would do. And it's just, it doesn't stop. It's like every time, And the thing is, like you said, before, I worked 25 years, worked in the paranormal. Never had issues with my phone. I had issues with you on the phone.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? It's just like never had any issues. There was another guy, which is very well documented in the movie, that goes by a completely made-up name called Daniel Skyfall, that had tons of information for me. He claims that he worked for a dark, or an unacknowledged group that basically his job was to provide disinformation until he realized kind of the harm that he was doing. And I'm trying so hard to get that guy to come forward. But the weird thing with him is I would get emails from him, right? So I would respond from the email, send it back. I would get a response saying that email doesn't exist, right? Like when you get a return email, then I would get his response. Like it would come back. And then after I was done reading it, somehow he's accessing my account and now deleting it without me deleting it. And that's what he's saying, that he can do all this stuff. He was telling me, don't look for my name. You're not going to find it. I just sent him this long, email just basically saying, you have to come forward. Like if there's no face and name to this stuff, there's only so much you can do. You know what I mean? Like someone has to come forward, not that I want to force anyone into an Edward Snowden life, but if you're telling me that this exists and this is all real and you know what's going on, then you've got to come forward.
Well, there's a few things, there's a few ways to classify all of this footage. You have nighttime UFO video footage, right? You don't know what's going on. It could be whatever.
Right.
The holy grail, the next step is the daytime UFO footage, right? Yes. And what is daytime UFO sighting? Completely different from a nighttime sighting. Daytime, you can now see the craft, you can see things, and so forth. There's that. And then you take it to the next level, which is a photograph of an actual alien, right? Standing on terra firma.
Yeah.
And it appears that that's exactly what you have got. And if that is what you have got, there are people out there that are very, very interested in this.
Well, I can tell you my stories. And this is when Craig first started telling me this stuff, as a friend and as somebody who knows him for so long, yes, I had a tendency to believe him, but because by nature I'm a skeptical person. I mean, I was the first person to say that when it comes to the paranormal. People like to go, about 90% of things are can be explained. No, 99.99% of things can be explained. There's just such a small margin, So I had a degree of doubt towards Craig, but one day, I get in my car, and this footage is also of this car following me is in the film as well. But it started with me just going to the bank, and the only reason I noticed it is because it had such tinted windows and its lights on during the day. This was a car that was following me.
Mercedes?
Yes, that black Mercedes. Lights on during the day, no matter how bright it is. Tinted black windows, as black as can be. So this is what's crazy. If I go to the bank, it would somehow pull in behind me. If I went to the grocery store, somehow pulling behind me. Go to Malibu, somehow pulling behind me. So the last time I was in Santa Monica, did 3 blocks around the block. It followed me, pulled out of the 405. It followed me, and that's where you see the footage where I'm talking about, can you see it right here with those lights on?
Right.
Now, I call my executive producer, Thomas Lee Bott. I'm very thankful for his support. Through him, these films exist. And we're talking about all this stuff. And he says, well, listen, a couple things. Drive him straight to the police department, slam it in park, and pull out with your camera blazing. You know what I mean? And just pull. So I'm like, awesome, good idea. So from that moment on, I never see him again. But now, Thomas and I's phone calls, the beeping starting, the calls are dropping, like all that stuff. So he was like, okay, well, then let's get a burner phone and let's start seeing if these things are happening. So it's like everything that we would talk about, there would be a reaction to it. And it was so strange because there were times where Thomas and I both, and he lives in Nevada and I live here, there were times where both of our calls would drop and they would both simultaneously be having no service. Not like looking for service, like how is the phone in 2 different states both dropping with no service. And by the way, the second that you start talking about this content.
Mm-hmm.
So I started seeing that this stuff was actually real and it was happening so many times. And the reason I was initially such a disbeliever in that stuff is because the government, I mean, look at the government right now, man. They can't even run right now. They're so backwards with stuff. You know what I mean? And I've always felt like, well, when it comes to actually monitoring people and all this stuff, I mean, they really have to have their stuff together. But then again, when you stop and look at it, the only reason to do any of this stuff right now would just be pure intimidation. And that's easy because they can monitor through anything that we do, right? With computers, cameras, satellites, they can monitor anybody. Why would someone physically follow you, physically mess with your phone, physically? That's pure physical intimidation. And I do believe that there's still a place in the government for that, for those tactics. So what is it that we have discovered? There's a lot of arguments that there's footage of a gray. Especially you see at the end, the reveal of Sir No Face is that the whole time throughout Sir No Face, you're thinking it's 5-6 feet tall. And you see at the end, it's about 3 feet tall. And it doesn't look like a baby. It looks like a grown 3 feet tall being, right? It doesn't look like a child, you know? So do we have that footage? I think there's a great argument for it. And this picture right here that I just showed you,
that's physical intimidation.
yes.
And see, there's when anybody says, and we've got to take a break right here, Chad, but to respond to that, when anybody, well, it takes manpower, it takes a lot of effort to get through this, and how would they be able to listen in on the phone? Look,
Not really.
automation, software, trigger words. The NSA monitoring center up in Utah, they're monitoring all text, all phone calls, recording everything, period. End of story, right? Well, if there are certain words that will trigger things and then pull somebody live on or monitor your conversation, and is that the beeps you're listening to? I don't know.
And that's not political. You know what I mean? If that happens,
easy is what it is.
Right. It's easy, and it's more of a military tactic than it is anything else. You know what I mean? An engagement tactic is what I'm saying. That's when I started thinking, well, political stuff takes time and it's hard to work and it's messy. This isn't. Someone has some information they shouldn't, shut them up.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
easy.
Absolutely. And it's very, very easy to monitor people's calls. And back when I did sports, right? So I was doing sports. I never had a technical issue.
Right.
I didn't have anything wrong. My life was beautiful.
Same.
I start talking about conspiracy and UFOs, and everything goes haywire all day long. All right, Chad
100%.
Calek is live with us here in the Coast Studios. We'll be right back after this short break. We're talking about his new documentary. It's called Two-Face, The Gray. It is his sequel to Sir No Face. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. And before we get back to Chad, who's live with us here in the studio, I've got two stories that I've got to share with you that are absolutely incredible. And we were just talking about technology right before the break. And then this was released today. The FBI is piloting a new program using Amazon's facial matching software called Amazon Recognition. That's right, CSI Los Angeles, right? To sift through mountains of their video surveillance footage that the agency routinely collects during investigations. The program kicked off earlier last year in 2018, following a string of high-profile counterterrorism investigations that just absolutely taxed the limits of the FBI's tech. And what's crazy to me is this. When you watch CSI and you see some surveillance camera, right, and they immediately zone in and they triangulate on the face and they get right, and they spit, you would think, well, they had to go to who really had the tech. They went to Amazon. And you need to think about that for a second. And now this next story, and you can read everything over at Coast to Coast AM, but this next story is about as incredible as it gets. Astronaut Andre Kuipers has made a 911 call from the International Space Station. That's right. He accidentally dialed 911 from space, sending security teams at NASA at their headquarters mad scramble to the room where the call was put through. He pressed 9. Now, you can dial a phone from the International Space Station. Makes sense, right? They've got the technology to do that. So he pressed 9, I'm not making this up, for an outside line. Are you listening to me, Chad? Are you listening to this? He dialed 9 for an outside line. And then he went to dial for an international number, which is 011. He forgot the 0. So he dials 911. From the International Space Station through NASA's headquarters back on Earth and straight through to the United States Emergency Services. And that is your news for the night. Chad, we'll be right back after this short break. We're going to continue our conversation about Two-Face, The Gray, the sequel to Sir No Face. Now, we're going to get to all of your phone calls. I got a couple questions here that just came off of Twitter. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Live in the studio with us is Chad Calek. And now, Chad, before we jump back into this, I've got this question that just came off of Twitter from Do Sky. And I think it's about as direct as we can get on all of this. Was the image visible, do you think, to the naked eye, or was it only visible through the camera in Sir No Face?
Oh, I believe it's definitely visible to the naked eye. I think the camera filmed what was in front of it. I don't think it was anything that, put it this way, if people been in the room, I think they'd absolutely saw whatever it was that looked around the corner.
Tell us how it was captured.
The camera was left up. It was locked off, and we had the ledgers. We know what time. We know who opened, and it was actually unlocked and locked by the security guard.
Right.
After they send people home, the camera ran for, I think it's, you have to see the exact marker, but it's like over 4 hours and 40 minutes before you actually see No Face, lean out and look into the camera. So what's really interesting is there's no way to get to that location without crossing the camera either. There's no sound. Now, when you watch the recreation, that building is almost collapsing. It's like so old. Craig and any woman who goes in there, you can't put pressure anywhere without the floorboard just cracking and creaking. And throughout that entire, 4 hour and 40-minute time period, there's absolutely zero sound. There's zero sound when No Face leans out and looks at it too, which made me feel again that initially that could be an apparition, is what we're talking about. It is. Also, the one thing to clear up too, you said that it looks like a door is open, and it is, but it's not like you think. Imagine those two doors that you're looking at. They're like French doors, like they push back like this. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're looking at the one door on the left folded back. Up against the wall.
Okay, I got it.
So if you watch the recreation footage with Craig, he can't even get behind the door. He can't get nowhere close to it. He can't hide himself to peek himself. So No Face comes out of a wall. Mm. He comes out of the wall. So yeah, the one thing that I loved about Sir No Face is after touring is, like I said, there's just very, very, very few people that question that it was something odd. Like they and we were so confident of that going out that we've done our homework on this.
So
we have the info.
Okay, the footage at the end and after and before, right? Mm-hmm. The when he peeks in, the microphones are live.
Microphones are live.
So there is nothing. There's no footsteps. There's nothing going on before and after the apparition.
Nothing.
That's incredible. It's an incredible piece of footage.
Zero audio. I mean, we've pulled it up and looked down to the finest line. I mean, we stretched that wave out. I mean, there's no sound. And when you watch the recreation, not only is there sound, it's incredibly loud sound wherever they're walking. Even for Craig, when he leans, it's like,
Now, there's one other thing before I get to these phone calls, and I'm just going to let everybody know, thank you for holding. We're going to get to phone calls here in just a second. But there is another element that happens here, which is like classic ufology. It's like ufology 101, which is missing time.
Yeah, and you know what? We went back and forth as to whether or not we were going to include that in Sir No Face.
Well, it happens in real time when everybody realizes what's going on.
Yeah, and you see that footage.
You never see that, and you hear stories about it,
right?
But to see it happen as it's going down is pretty interesting.
Well, and to give them credit, the reason you see it happen is because they're a serious team that is doing exactly what they should be doing. They're marking time, locations, where they were, where they're at, where they went, where they're going next. And you see this, obviously, this happen. We clearly chose to include it into Two-Face the Gray because you're right. It's classic abduction, connection activity with the extraterrestrial. But there were additional things, too. The one thing that really shocked me when I went there is almost every member of Craig's team at some point was crying in these interviews that they were so overwhelmingly brokenhearted. Not that the investigation was just over, but that they had a connection with this entity to the degree that Craig is crying. You know, his friends are crying. The 2 or 3 of the women were crying. And we were all just kind of going, what is going on here? Mm-hmm. Now, and I know from my own studies that people that do have, encounters with extraterrestrials, often they do feel like there's some kind of family connection, some kind of some people report feeling like they have a sibling or like there's a sibling connection or a child connection. Now, it's not all the time, but this has happened. This has happened where people feel this incredibly immense emotional connection. So that was like our initial starting point where we're going, okay, well, they're losing time. This happens on more than one occasion. They have this incredibly emotional situation. The entity does appear to have a physical nature to it, which could go both sides, but it certainly could go extraterrestrial. But the things that made it really weird to me was the way the government handled it. Just the fact that they were just like, yeah, just stay out there. Please, just stay out here, guys. Just stay out here.
Right.
When Craig's showing them they brought them there to find evidence. Craig's showing them the most incredible evidence ever. He's bringing them into rooms where lights are going off. He's showing footage of things looking around the corner. And they're like, cool, keep investigating. You know, why? Why? So then when you start, like I said, really looking into the different, and there's that whole area is really weird. There was recently a UFO sighting that, and he had footage of a Russell Crowe had as well over there.
Yes.
There's just been a ton of sightings in that area, and a lot of people think that it has a lot to do with Pine Gap, obviously.
Have you seen the new Pine Gap TV series?
I've watched 2 episodes of it.
We binged it, man. I knocked it out in one night. It's excellent.
Is it? Okay.
There's one spot where in the missing time sequence where they're walking up the stairs and they come around the stairwell and she says, what's her name?
Which girl?
The missing time. The producer. Nikki.
Yeah.
She says, what time is it? It's 12:05. I think. She goes, what do you mean? We've only been walking here for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It hasn't been an hour.
Well, and when they all started, they all checked their watches.
They all checked their watches.
They logged it.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And there's a big difference between a couple of minutes on the stairwell and an hour.
Right.
And to watch everybody completely confused about what they were actually understanding, the reality of their watches are telling them it's been an hour,
right? But
they've walked up a stairwell. It's a pretty amazing piece of footage. Let's grab some of these phone calls here. Let's go to Barry in South Carolina. Barry, I needed to have you on my first show back for 2019.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Jimmy, for saying so. And listen, it's always a pleasure when you're the host on Coast to Coast.
It's always a perfect show, Barry, when you're the caller. So welcome, and I hope you had a good New Year. What do you have for Chad?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jimmy. Chad, I've got a quick story and then a question for you at the end of the story. But talking about the Men in Black, and you were talking about your friend Craig being scared to death by a couple of Men in Black. This happened about 25, 30 years ago to me. I was in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I went to a ladies' professional golf association tournament at Donald Trump's golf course. It was brand new at the time.
Huh.
And I'll never forget walking down one of the sidewalks. I was glancing around, there were people everywhere, and this blonde-headed guy was standing over there with his back to me, and was talking to a couple of men in black type characters, security guards. And about the time I got 20 feet away from him or something, he turned around to walk up to the clubhouse, and I was face to face with him. He looked me out of the eye, and I said, well, hello there. I'd love to shake hands with a real mover and a shaker, Donald. Called him by his first name. And he said, well, I like that saying. Good saying. He said, and then I told him my dad was a golf pro, and we got to talking about Pinehurst, North Carolina, and we talked for about 15 minutes. And I noticed that these two guys in black were over there kind of keeping their eye on us. And sure enough, we shook hands again, and he left. And those two guys, I started down the sidewalk, and the two guys came over to me and said, no problem, don't worry about it. Said, but most people don't approach Mr. Trump that way. And I said, well, he just turned around and was right there face to face with me. And he said, yeah, we saw you. And I said, well, look, I did something wrong. I'm sorry. And then they said, no, but just be careful. And I'll say this. Both of them were wearing sunglasses with fedora hats, black suits, white shirt and black ties, black shoes. And when I walked away, sure enough, I mean, their sunglasses looked like they had little cameras on the sides of the ear frames, and maybe taking my picture. I don't even know. But anyway, my question after that story, my question is, like Craig, have you ever been threatened, Chad, by anybody in the Men in Black or so forth? And thanks for taking my call.
Well, I appreciate you listening, and thank you for the story. I wouldn't call it a threat. I talked earlier about the people, or someone was following me, which I found threatening, but it was more because I don't know what was going on or who it was. But I did have only one experience with what I would call potentially a Men in Black, and I'll let you guys decide, because I don't know if I'm completely decided yet. But my American Ghost Hunter documentary fortunately did very well. It's the number one in America, the most watched paranormal documentary on Hulu. So I get kind of noticed for that one more than kind of any of the other stuff. So I was down below my house. I live around the beach in Santa Monica. There's this restaurant, and there's this wall that you can just go down and watch the sun come up. And there was a guy that came up next to me and sat down, and he was just watching everything that's going on. But the reason I noticed him is it was a hot morning, and he had black shirt on, black overcoat on, black pants on. And he was just, watching the sun come up, and we struck up a conversation just about Santa Monica, and it's, beautiful little corner of life here and all that stuff. And he says to me, so what do you do? And I tell him that, I'm a filmmaker. This is about a week after Craig's call about the, quote, Men in Black. And I'm telling him I'm a filmmaker, but I've not said my name yet. And so we talked about American Ghost Hunter, and I started talking about my family a little bit and all that stuff. And I said, well, I got to get back because my wife is taking off to go to school. I was going to say goodbye to her. So I get up, and as I'm leaving and walking away, he says, hey, good luck with that Two-Face the Gray. At that time, I had only done like whispers about it, and I hadn't really done any posting. I had spoken about it at live events, but nothing in California. And I remember turning and looking at him and thinking,
how did you know that?
Yeah, how is that possible?
Right.
Could it be someone that was just extremely into what I'm doing, and could they have been at a live event? Could they have done? I don't know. Didn't feel right at all. It didn't feel right. And he said it in a manner that was very like look what I know type of thing. I don't, dare I say, he wasn't truly wishing me well on my movie.
Right.
That's the only experience I've had since, but nothing since then at all.
Well, when it comes to the UFO community and subject, I think as time moves along, you start to realize that you need to expect these things to happen.
That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, they're going to happen. Don't overreact. Don't freak out. Don't. If you start to, go through some kind of paradigm shift or shift your own reality, right, you're going to start to question your own sanity. It's not about that, and it's just that these strange things that are coincidences are going to happen.
Right.
I don't know if the intimidation is caused to silence you, to scare you, to freak you out, to make you think that you're crazy, or is it that they're truly interested in what you are saying and they're trying to glean information from you?
Right.
Are they looking to see who else you are meeting up with? Is there that part? And of course, I think the obvious thing is if you are in possession of knowledge, that maybe they can push you to the edge of sanity.
Well, here's what, we can't get past, and Craig and I have talked about this over and over again. What we know for sure is this was a government-sanctioned paranormal investigation. We know that. We've spoken to the government about it. Right. What we know for sure is he filmed something. We know that. So those two things being real, how can I say anything else couldn't be real? You know what I mean? You have to take it all with a degree of, I think, skepticism, but also with the reality that there are strange things in this world that are completely unexplained and that we don't know. And going through this and seeing this entity, whatever this was that he filmed, and, having my own interactions and then listening to a grown man terrified on the phone that I know to be an extremely brave man, you have to stop and say, what is it that we have stepped into? And I don't know yet.
Rita and I, this happened to us twice. I'm not going to say where, when, or anything like that, but we were on the freeway, speakerphone in my car with a conversation that was going down with somebody about this subject.
Right.
I'm not going to say any more than that. But as in the middle of the conversation, as we were driving down the freeway, we heard this. Beep, phone call recording now. Yeah. Beep. On the speakerphone in the car.
Yeah.
And I was like, did you hear that? And just no way.
Yeah.
Hung up the phone call, continued to drive, called back and just started talking. Yeah, that was pretty strange. Initiating phone call recording now. Beep. Happened again.
Yeah.
Now this it's something that when that occurs in this world that we are in, it's just like no harm, no foul. You have to accept it. Right. This is Coast to Coast AM. Live in the studio with us is Chad Calek. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Coast to Coast AM. We'll be right back. Now, if you like what I do here and you like to hang out with me and my guest and do what I do here on Coast to Coast AM, you need to check out my other show. It's called Fade to Black. It's easy to get to. Click on my name over at Coast to Coast AM. It'll take you straight to our website for jimmychurchradio.com. Everything is listed there. We broadcast live 7 to 10 p.m. Pacific time, Monday through Thursday, live for 3 hours each night right before Coast to Coast. And we do that for a reason. So you can listen to Fade to Black for 3 hours, finish that, go straight over, get 4 hours of Coast to Coast, and get your 7 hours of paranormal, conspiracy, UFO, time travel, ghost story fix on. That's what we do, okay? And you can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. It's all simple. Now, I'm going to get out of here. I want to get back and get to your phone calls and finish our conversation with the one and only Chad Calek, who is live here in the studio. This is Coast to Coast AM. Stay with us. Welcome back. Are we live? Are we live? Is this on? I know, I'm just messing with you. All right. Now, Chad Calek is our guest. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Coast to Coast AM. It's my first show in 2019. It's been a great event tonight. We've got lots of calls to get to, and we're going to wrap up our conversation with Chad. And, Chad, I do want to thank you for taking the time to come in and hang out with us on this very, very special evening. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, honestly. It's an honor, and, this is a cool format, and I remember being a little younger and hoping one day I'd be on Coast to Coast, so it's cool.
Yeah, you know what? When you finally, you're absolutely right about that. There are careers out there and dreams and rock and roll dreams, but Coast to Coast is very special to all of us.
Yes,
and it's an honor for me when I'm out there with people, talking to them, and they don't know anything about me or whatever. But Coast to Coast comes up, and then, oh yeah, absolutely, been listening forever, and I really, it's an honor, and everybody wants to get their career in such a way in the paranormal world that maybe one day, I'll get the phone call. Maybe one day.
I just remember art was, when I was younger, it was like the light. This is like for people who were, had dealt or come across the paranormal, had a fascination. That was the pillar. You know what I mean? That's the guy that lended a voice.
Well,
to that stuff,
you know what? You bring up,
continued on. Yeah.
You bring up a very important point, and I mentioned this at the front of the show. What Art was doing back at the beginning of Coast to Coast with the website, which was presenting, this is the young days of the internet.
Yeah.
But the importance of having images and video up on the Coast website during the interview.
Yeah.
Right? And it set up everything that was to follow. Paranormal State or American Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures, the whole ghost hunting field and capturing things on video and getting them back up on the net. Well, if we all are honest with ourselves and look back, Art and Coast to Coast AM set it up for everybody, and that it was possible to get this stuff done. Yeah. And what it enabled everybody to do, like yourself, right? It was such a groundbreaking thing, was that you can now go and maybe capture your own video and get it up there for the world to see. And that's how important Coast to Coast was for myself and everybody else out there.
Well, and for someone like me, who's like, obviously, I spent a lot of time working with networks and stuff with, paranormal stuff earlier on in my career. But as I moved over to doing purely just what fascinates me and making my own documentaries and doing every aspect of filmmaking, things like Coast to Coast are incredible because it actually gives us a voice without a middleman. I could know you, sit down, and we talk about all this and spread the word directly to the people, which is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, let's go straight to the people. I'll let you pick, east or west?
West.
You're going west. So let's go to Gina Maria out west in Washington. Gina Maria, welcome to Coast.
Hello, love and peace, and God bless to everyone and everything, first of all. Something you said struck me when you said about being watched by the men in black and such. I've had many UFO experiences, and well, not many, but several, and psychic abilities and different gifts from God and such. And anyhow, and the last place I lived, it was set back into the woods, a long driveway, and I would just know that there was somebody out there. There was a road that went past, and a kind of a hill, and off on the shoulder there would be a vehicle parked, and someone standing outside of it, and there would be a little window through the trees where you could kind of see just barely where I lived. And every time I had this feeling, there would be what I call a watcher. I don't know if that's the correct term, but I call them watchers. Would be a watcher out there. And when I didn't have this feeling, there wouldn't be one. So anyhow, I'm also a protected witness. So in the meantime, I moved to a new residence where I live now, and was sitting on the porch with a boyfriend I had at the time. He's long gone, I think, because of this circumstance. Sitting out there with him, and I tell him, "Oh, they're here." And he says, "Who's here?" And I said, "The watchers." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Look out there." I live way back in the back of a big property. I said, "Look way out there on the road. There's a vehicle parked way over there." And he said, "So that doesn't mean much." And I said, "Well, watch what they do." And I told him the series of things they were going to do with their lights, sitting right where they were, turning them on, turning them bright, turning them dim, turning them bright. I said, "Now they're going to start moving, and they're going to come to the stop sign." And they did. And I said, "And now they're going to turn their brights on and just sit there." And they did. And there's no traffic coming. They could easily have gone right or left. They didn't go any which way. And I said, they're going to sit there for about 5 minutes, and then they're going to proceed to go down the road, my right, but to their left. They're facing me. And pretty soon they did exactly what I said. And then I said, oh, now there's another one coming. And they're going to turn on that road. They're going to turn around, and they're going to sit in that same spot and do the same exact thing. And they did. And
did you ever walk up to them?
I live way back on this property, really long driveway. I never feared from them. I felt like they were watching over me. Maybe not from this world, maybe, let's say, but just watching over me. I wasn't afraid of them.
All right.
I just felt like they were there. I don't know. It was almost comforting, kind of strange, but interesting. But I always knew when they'd be there and what they do.
Yeah. All I'm going to say is, if you weren't scared, then I'm okay with it. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you were okay with it.
Oh yeah. But then I don't fear much. I have God on my side no matter what. So no matter what, I'm okay.
And have a great 2019, Gina Maria. Thank you so much.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
2 different watchers' experiences at 2 different residences. Very, very interesting in a remote area. You went west. I'm going to go east to Jim in Pennsylvania. Jim, you're up next on Coast. Welcome.
Hey, Chad. I wanted to talk about the shadow piece.
Okay, Jim, you got to get up on your phone, please.
Oh, there we go. Everything just went quiet. I want to talk to Chad about the black shadow people. I have a friend of mine that has some kind of a black shadow person in his bedroom.
Okay.
And he sees it during the day. He works at night. And we first got talking about this because I was telling him about, something I seen in my son's house. And he's like, well, I have this black shadow in my bedroom that comes and goes. And it only happened ever since his wife passed away. But he said this thing covered him one morning, and he couldn't move. And he wasn't scared, but he couldn't move. He said it was the weirdest thing. And he said to me, he said, I'm having a nervous breakdown. And I've known this guy for like 22 years.
Right.
And this is happening up in upstate New York.
Right. Well, I wouldn't, just offhand, if something is physically engaging him and holding him down and scaring him, this would be more along the lines of just a negative spirit, not a shadow person. The thing with shadow men and shadow people, it's one of the oldest recorded phenomena that, literally has been recorded around the world by every known religion, country. It goes back forever. And the thing about shadow people is they're voyeurs. They don't communicate directly. They don't throw people around. They don't touch people. Like, they literally just watch. And one of the frustrating things about them is the closer you get to them, the faster they move. They often vanish right away. So that's a clear classification of a shadow people. Now, so if he's seeing something dark and black and that is, scaring him and holding him down, that's a whole different animal. As to what he is experiencing, especially if it started happening after his wife passed away. I don't know what his religious beliefs are, but I always tell people when it comes to religion, perception is reality. The power of your mind is the power. So if you believe, for example, if I was Catholic and I believe that St. Michael's medallion could give me some kind of strength, the presence of that medallion would make it real for me. But if I'm not, which I'm not, then that medallion doesn't mean anything to me. So whatever religion this person is, I would start there, and I would just start meeting with his local, preacher or priest, and discuss what he can do to actually get it taken care of.
I wanted to ask you about the media format for what was captured for Sir No Face.
Yeah.
Is it videotape? Is it on?
It was video. It was 1080i. It was 1080i video footage. Please, everybody that's out there, if you just go to Facebook or Instagram and just search Craig Powell, Powell. Craig is very responsive to people. He can tell you the exact tech specs on every single thing that happened there. He's just a great guy in general. That's like I said, he's very outspoken to people. So please go visit him. But I know it was 1080i HD video footage with a night shot on in the room.
Right. Now, is the original raw footage available? I know that there's been a lot of investigations going into this. Looking at it, but is the original raw data video file available?
In Two-Face the Gray, there's several spots where it's marked too, where I use raw footage, and I just use the actual clip itself. It's also on the DVD, and there's also, when you watch Sir No Face, there's the first time you see it, and then it does the replay. When we do the replay, we pull everything off of it. That's also raw too, as well. But as far as has Craig put up the raw clip? I don't know. I don't know if he has or he hasn't. I don't think so. But it's the same thing that is in the movie and is in the documentary as well. So.
Yeah, because for you're a debunker yourself. Right. You've gone back and torn stuff apart, including your own footage.
Yeah.
When you look at this and somebody wants to debunk it, what is there to debunk? Yeah. There hasn't been anything compiled or composited. Right, it's just the unaltered raw file, and that's what we're seeing.
Right, that's what you're seeing in the movie. Right, and that was one of the things we talked about on tour as well too, where they were like, well, how do we know that this is the raw footage? And even as somebody who knows footage, I'm looking at it going, I don't know what could be faked. I don't, you're watching them step out. If someone wants to go, oh, they faked it with, a person or whatever. I mean, that's obviously their opinion, and we have a whole film that demonstrates how that didn't happen.
Right.
But with the footage itself, that's what I loved about the footage, is that it's so in your face, and it's so right here. Here it is.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch the audience's reaction when they see it for the first time. As we wind down here, and we're nearly at the end. Yep. Disclosure and what the government knows and what the world expects, and it doesn't matter if you believe in UFOs or not,
right.
Having the government admit that we are not alone in the universe is a very important step, and it's something that we have thought about since the dawn of time, if we are alone as we look up at the stars.
Yeah.
What's your opinion of that? 2018 got pretty crazy with UFOs in the headlines, and it felt like we were right on the edge of something big.
There's a big part of that in Two-Face the Gray that kind of delves into what's going on right now. And, it's funny, we just had a conversation earlier where I said my first manager that I ever had told me, if you ever want to know what's going on in the world, take a look at what the ultra elite are doing, the ultra rich.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were just having this conversation about how, Bezos, Bigelow, Musk, Branson,
Gates.
Right. They're all trying to get off the planet.
Right.
And they're all trying to go somewhere else. And you have to ask why. Why is Trump announcing Space Force? Why now? Why, after the government forever told everybody that they were, made fun of everybody for saying, I saw something, now they suddenly come out and go, yeah, we had ATEP. Yeah, we've been, doing this forever. And so why would you believe anything they've ever said about anything in the past? And the film gets into that a lot. And I think there's a lot to this grand fake alien invasion type theory. I don't think it's going to play out as people present it, but I do think there's something to it. What people don't get is when those 3 videotapes come out, and suddenly there's David Fravor on doing interviews. There's publicists that are setting this up.
Absolutely.
There are people doing this. So if the Department of Defense is releasing this, they're doing this, and the head of the Department of Defense is Trump. So none of this stuff is going past him. This is all happening for a very important reason. So I think that it becomes less and less crazy that Craig or I inadvertently, through documenting his case, could have stumbled upon something that we weren't supposed to, especially when you look how closely we work with Australia.
Right. And what's really interesting with all of that, and we've got literally 45 seconds left, is that with all of the announcements that went down in 2018, the expectation we were led to believe was that the world would go crazy. Right, we would start jumping off of buildings. The Vatican would implode. Wall Street, there would be, chaos in the streets, and everybody would lose their minds. That we couldn't handle it. Well, clearly we can.
We can. It's time, and I think that's what Two-Face really shows people. Because there's seconds left, again, everybody, go see it at vimeo.com/on-demand/Two-Face. I think we are on the verge And I think 2019 is going to be fireworks.
All of the links are over at coasttocoastam.com for Chad.
Jimmy, the best. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. What a great way to kick off 2019. Thank you so much, Chad. And with that, I'm going to get out of here. It says I'll see everybody in a couple of weeks right here on Coast, but I got to give special thanks to, of course, Mike running the board, Donna behind the glass, Chris, my producer, of course, Greg, Tim, Lex, George, Tom, Lisa, Stephanie, and my beautiful wife, Rita. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.